All right, we are live. Hello, everybody. It looks like we might have a breakthrough in talks between the United States and Iran. We're going to talk about that in great detail in just a minute. But another breaking news item that is probably going to have you reeling is that the Houthis may very soon be facing ground troops. That means they may be in actual pitched battles in conventional warfare, but not necessarily with the United States. Kind of, kind of not. We're going to talk more about that in a minute as well. We got a whole lot to get through today. We're going to talk about what's going on in Israel, Gaza, Syria, Lebanon, and if we have time, we might even get to uh, Russia and Ukraine. I wanted to answer a question I saw go by before we started, and that was that it's something I can answer very quickly and easily. Somebody asked where Iran gets their uranium for their nuclear program. There are uranium mines in, uh, I think, Bandar Abbas or someplace like that in Iran, and they have tried to get uranium from the black market in getting it from Pakistan and other places in the past. So that's just whoever asked that question. Please make sure that you hit the like button, folks, and subscribe to the channel. And chat, put where you're watching from in the chat, please. That is very interesting to see. We have people coming from all over the world, and it helps me kind of better tailor my message because I have a better understanding of who all is watching. Also, it helps the algorithm too, so that doesn't hurt. So tell me where you're coming in from in the chat. Make sure you like and share the podcast. Just hit the like button while we're talking. You just go up there and, hit that little like button, and there you go. Okay, so recent developments. President Donald Trump announced today that the United States will engage in direct discussions with Iran regarding its nuclear program, scheduled to begin this Saturday, April 12th, in Qatar. Now, Trump also, as a part of his announcement, said that Iran would face great danger, that's a quote, if these negotiations fail to convince them to halt their nuclear weapons development. Now, Iranian officials acknowledged that they will be talking to somebody, but contradicted Trump's statement by saying that the talks would be indirect. That means like shuttle diplomacy, where the Iranians will only talk to the Qataris, and then the Qataris goes talk to Steve Witkoff. Steve Witkoff then talks back to the Qataris, and the Qataris go talk back to the Iranians. That's what the Iranians say is going to happen, but that is definitely not what Trump has signed up for. So we'll see what actually happens, whether it is conducted directly or through a mediator, uh, will tell us a lot about where the Iranians are. Now, what would bring the Iranians to the table here all of a sudden? It could be the massive buildup of U.S. forces in the region on par with the buildup that we had running up to the invasion of Iraq in 2003. And if, history is any measure, Iran is looking at that and going, we don't want to have a shock and awe campaign over Tehran. And so they are pulling back their tentacles a little bit. They're trying to distance themselves from their, especially more belligerent proxies like the Houthis. They are pulling their advisors out of Yemen. And yesterday we heard from the Iranian-backed militias in Iraq that those guys are willing to lay down their arms to keep from getting smacked upside the head by the United States. So they obviously are wanting to at least appear conciliatory or willing to engage in talks, but I don't think that they're serious at all about actually coming to an agreement because, again, Trump's red line is Iran has to get rid of their nuclear program. And Iran has said over and over again, our nuclear program is only for peaceful purposes and it's not up for negotiation. We're not getting rid of it. Well, if it was only for peaceful purposes, they wouldn't need to bury it 2,000 feet under a mountain. And there is no peaceful use for uranium that is enriched to above 60%. And by some accounts, Iran has already been enriching their uranium above 60%. I'm sure that the Mossad probably has a pretty good handle on that. They're pretty good at spying on the Iranian government because the Iranian government is so corrupt. Anybody can be bought off. And as we've seen with when they took out Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, that the Israelis have their tentacles pretty deep into the Iranian government. So would not surprise me if the Israelis know a lot more than they're letting on about what the capabilities are of the Iranians. Now, the Iranians are continuing to make military preparations in case the United States decides to attack. Senior Iranian military commanders have been conducting operational assessments around the country and moving whatever chess pieces they have left around, like the very few air defense assets, for example, that they've either salvaged or purchased since they were all destroyed back in October, are being moved around and set up and everything. They're assessing all of their units. They've got all their units on high alert, and it's part of a broader effort to ensure that they're as ready as they can be in case of an attack. But everybody knows that the B-2 bomber is just going to sail right in there like it doesn't even exist, and it's going to drop a 30,000-pound massive ordnance penetrator bomb wherever it wants. The United States arsenal is full of bunker busters, and they're very, very accurate and very lethal. So if the United States decides to go kinetic against Iran, there's really nothing Iran can do about it, and they know that. So they're going through the motions of getting their troops on high alert, but in reality, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they have a 500,000 or 1,000,000 troops standing there with their weapons. It's just, target-rich environment for the United States. That the U.S. will have a lot more to take out. Now, turning to Yemen, the Yemeni government, led by its Presidential Leadership Council. Now, understand what I said. The Yemeni government, not the Houthis. I know that's confusing, but the Houthis are rebels that took over part of Yemen, and they took over the part that had the military bases and the military, and so they sort of inherited the military when they took over Sana'a. So they are in control of much of Yemen, but not all of Yemen. And so the legitimate Yemeni government, which is they call themselves the Presidential Leadership Council, has been reportedly preparing for a major ground offensive against Houthi forces to try to push the Houthis out of Yemen. Now, you're going to see a bloodbath if that happens. But I have mentioned several times, I talked about it a little bit yesterday, the United States has U.S. Special Forces on the ground in Yemen training the Yemeni forces of the Presidential Leadership Council to fight the Houthis. Because, as I keep saying, we can't bomb our way out of this problem in Yemen. There's going to have to be forces on the ground. And since we don't want to send Americans in on the ground to do it, what we've done is we've sent a couple special forces teams with a lot of money, and we will probably coordinate. What they're doing is they're training up those forces and training them on what's called combined arms warfare. Rather than just, jumping on the back of your camel and heading off with your scimitar to try to go do battle against the Houthis. What they're trying to do is organize these guys, get them into units, get them somehow civilized enough to understand that they can call on the radio and that plane up there can use its God hammer and can smite your enemies before you, and you don't have to go in and fight them. I think that's going to be a little bit of a challenge because Yemenis are highly uneducated. I remember an example of another war that I covered during the piracy crisis in Somalia. I went to Somalia, and there was a organization that got together from the UAE and decided to try to create a maritime police force to go after the Somali pirates. And they wanted to hire Somalis to do that. What they ended up doing was hiring Somali pirates, paying Somali pirates to come be a police force to put a stop to piracy. The problem that the South African mercenaries ran into that were training those guys is that you're talking about people that have never used a light switch, that have never slept in a bed, who've never used a toilet in their lives. Uh, they don't know what a spoon is. They're okay. So this is the level that we're talking about. And so you're trying to take these guys out and teach them combined arms tactics, and it's just not going to work very well. I went out with the Puntland Maritime Police Force, on a live fire training exercise, which was one of the most terrifying things I've ever done in my whole life. We rode to the range in the back of Hilux pickup trucks, me and a whole bunch of Somali guys with AK-47s. And when they got out to the range, it was basically just a wide open. I mean, Somalia is a lot like Yemen. It's just big dirt parking lot. In this case, it was a big dirt parking lot with a mountain for a backstop. And so Colonel North, my partner at the time, was with the advisors, the South African mercenaries, who were there to watch. They had been training these guys, and then they sent them out on this mission on this live fire training range to see how they would do. So Colonel North went with the instructors. They went up on a hillside, kind of off to the side, and were watching from up there. I went with the soldiers themselves, and they got up to the line. They jumped out of their vehicles. Nobody had any ear protection. Nobody had any eye protection except me. And they all jump out and just start shooting in like all directions, just randomly. I mean, there were no targets set up. There was a big rock, I remember, about the size of a beach ball that was maybe 100 yards ahead of us. And it was really the only thing out there. So everybody just started shooting at that rock. But then the bullets started pew, pew, just ricocheting past us, going over my head. And I started going, "Don't shoot the rock." And I was yelling at the guys like, "Don't shoot the rock." And they all looked at me. Of course, they're deaf now because they've been shooting their AK-47s on full auto with no ear protection. And they're like, "What? Shoot the rock? Okay." And they kept shooting at the rock. And I just took off running. I just like ran and hid behind the vehicles. Later on, found out that Colonel North and the mercenaries were like taking cover as well, because these guys were shooting at just everything, and they had bullets going over their own instructors' heads. It was an absolute goat rodeo from start to finish. And I imagine that's what the US Special Forces are facing in trying to train Yemeni forces to go after the Houthis. Fortunately for them, the Houthis are not any better trained than the Yemeni forces. And so, like I said, it's going to be a bloodbath. It's going to be a lot of people killed. I think the United States will try to put their thumb on the scale when those battles commence by dropping bombs on the Houthis. If they can figure out which side is the Houthis out there, there's just going to be bullets flying everywhere. Believe me, we don't want U.S. troops anywhere near that. But hopefully, the outcome will be that the Yemeni forces will push the Houthis out. I mean, there's nowhere to push them to. They will just massacre the Houthis and probably a lot of innocent civilians to boot. But if they are able to take out the Houthis, then maybe the missiles will stop flying at Israel and drones and stuff. And then we can all go back to our TV dinners and not have to worry about the shipping getting shot at in the Bab el-Mandab Straits anymore. Now, this planned offensive could involve military advances from multiple directions, southeast and west. That'd be fantastic, because then the Houthis can shoot in all directions and the Yemenis can shoot in all directions, and everybody will just kill everybody. I mean, it's like, this is going to be a goat rope of epic proportions. U.S. Central Command, in the meantime, has been intensifying their air campaign, conducted at least 26 airstrikes yesterday, we're told, against Houthi infrastructure and leadership positions across Yemen. They also struck a command and control site in Hudaydah City, some military bases near Sadr City, and some naval sites on Kamran Island. Now, Kamran Island is the biggest island that belongs to Yemen. One of the only places in Yemen where there's anything green. Unfortunately, it's just the water that's green. I actually have a map here we can take a look at. This is Yemen in one photograph. Big dirt parking lot, mud-covered huts for dwellings, and water. But this is a picture taken on Kamran Island. If we go to the actual look at the map here, I got to get rid of the picture. Okay, so here's Yemen, right? And if we zoom in on Hodeidah, there's Kamran Island right there. All right, and you see what I said about the only thing green in Yemen is the water. That water is actually that color. So I'm not sure what makes it that color, but I certainly wouldn't want to swim in it. And that's Yemen for you. All right. Let's go back to my camera. And folks, we got 4,000 people online, only 621 likes. You either don't like what I'm saying or you just forgot to go hit the like button. Do me a favor and go punch that little like button and hit the subscribe button right next to it while you're at it. That tells YouTube's algorithm that more people need to see this content, and it helps us get the word out and keep doing our job. So that's helpful. You can help me help you. It's free, doesn't cost you anything to go hit that like button. So thank you very much for those of you who are taking my request to heart. Pretty camels, Robert says. My wife absolutely adores camels. I'm glad that they don't have camels in Panama, or we would own one. My wife labors under the impression that if it's cute, she has to own one. She has to own it. So I'm really glad we don't have like pandas and camels in Panama, because we already have dogs, cats, and monkeys here at the house. And that's plenty in terms of pets. All right, let's talk about developments happening in Syria. The interim government there, that's, I guess, the best way to call them, HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, former Al-Qaeda, that's running Syria now, are meeting with the various militias. There are hundreds of militias in Syria of all kinds: Druze, Kurdish, Yazidi, Armenian, of course, Sunni, even Shia. And the Sunnis are the ones in control right now, backed by Turkey. And they're trying to consolidate their power across the country. So they're having talks with the Kurds to see if they can sort of absorb the Syrian Democratic Forces, SDF, into Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. That would be a really bad day, I think, for the world. The Kurds are not extremists. They're one of the few Sunni majority people groups on planet Earth that are not full of extremists. They're very progressive. They love America, and they have gotten a lot of help from America. And so, if America, pulls back from Syria, then you may see the Kurds feel that they have no other option than to join with HTS, which would bring them under the auspices of Muslim Brotherhood, uh, Islamic State, right? And that probably won't go well for the Kurds. Could end up with a lot of people being disappeared. And it's not going to bode well for the Israelis either. The Israelis and the Kurds need to make a treaty and establish a corridor across the southern part of Syria that would connect Israel with the Kurdish held Rojava area of Syria and let the Druze control that corridor. And the Druze are friendly to the Israelis, the Kurds are friendly to the Israelis, and that would help put a stop to the smuggling that's going on because Hezbollah is doing its best to reconstitute. They are trying, they've designated 2 new units now to smuggle weapons into Lebanon. A lot of those weapons are coming out of Turkey. Most of the smuggling is now taking place by sea, coming into the port in Beirut, because the port in Beirut is wholly controlled by Hezbollah, as well as the airport. When I flew into Beirut last, it was for a piece I was making about the 30th anniversary of the Marine barracks bombings there. And the Marine barracks were on airport grounds. And so the ruins of the barracks are still there, and we wanted to film them. So we were told, well, you have to get permission from Hezbollah to film the barracks. And I was like, is that a thing? Can we do that? And they're like, yeah, they got an office in the basement of the airport. So this guy took us downstairs, and we walked in there, and there's 2 fat guys wearing berets and sort of half military uniform, smoking cigarettes in there and looking at us like, you know. And so we're like, hey, we're just here making a documentary. We'd like to be able to get some footage of some different places on the airport, and I wonder if that we could get permission from you to do that. And he just kind of goes, smoking his cigarette and looking at us, and he says, if you take pictures of our airport, your picture will be in the newspaper tomorrow. Goodbye. That kind of thing. We're like, okay, well, I guess we're not taking pictures of the airport. Thank you very much. See you later. And we made an about face and got out of there as quickly as possible. We rented a car and then drove up the mountainside, which is right next to the airport, but not on airport grounds, and just got a long lens out and got the footage we needed from above the airport, and then didn't air it, obviously, until we got out of Lebanon. But those guys own that area, and so they can control the stuff that's coming in there. And they're trying very hard to reconstitute Hezbollah's military capacity because it has taken a huge blow. For their part, the Israelis are still making things spontaneously combust all across Lebanon, up in the Bekaa Valley and elsewhere, wherever they see a target of opportunity. The Mossad is still very active inside Lebanon, and they've put a lot of electronic surveillance in. As the Israeli troops have gone into Lebanon, they have just wired almost everything for sound. And by doing that, they now have the capability to suck up tons of information that they didn't have before, and they can run that through artificial intelligence and get actionable intelligence out of it, like who needs to experience a rapid unscheduled disassembly, who needs to go kablooey in the near future. So in Syria, that's happening as well. Talk more about that in just a second. Let me think here. So there's a Druze majority, separatist Druze majority called the Suwaida Military Council, and they're opening centers in different parts of Syria We're not really exactly sure why. It looks like they may be trying to recruit so that they can form their own militias. There's another Druze majority militia called the Men of Dignity, and one of their former members is meeting with the new Syrian defense minister, likely having discussions focusing on the Israeli presence in the southern part of Syria. What we should hope is that those meetings do not result in the Druze turning against the Israelis down in southern Syria. I'm hoping that doesn't happen for sure. Somebody was asking if the Iranians have activated any of their sleeper cells in the United States. We wouldn't know that until those guys went kinetic, meaning they attacked something. They may have gotten the phone call to say, be prepared to attack something. As I said yesterday, I think it's only a matter of time in the United States before we see what is called a massive multi-cell terror attack. Think Mumbai on steroids. So if you recall the attacks that took place in Mumbai, this was 15 years ago, there were these Pakistani terrorists that came into Mumbai, India, and they attacked multiple locations across Mumbai, big city of millions of people, all at once. And what it created was absolute gridlock where even the police weren't able to respond in a timely fashion because everything was just packed with traffic. People couldn't move. It was just gridlock. And so that gave the terrorists the ability to go through like the hotel that they had taken over and just systematically execute tons of people. Hundreds of people died in those attacks. And then when the police finally did get around or get there to try to counter that, a whole bunch more civilians died in the crossfire. And I'm telling you, look, this is something the United States is not prepared well enough for. And somebody said yesterday, if they try that, they're going to get a bunch of concealed carriers. They're going to take them out. Well, I hope so, but I don't think there are even enough concealed carriers who are prepared and trained to take action if something like that were to take place. And if the Iranians activated sleeper cells, let's imagine, I wouldn't be surprised if they have 1,000 agents in the United States. They could have 5,000. We don't know. But let's say they only activated 100 of them. And those 100 guys just planned to execute some sort of active violence attack against Americans in different cities around the country, all at the same time. It would bring our country to a screeching halt. And that's something that is extremely important for us to understand. And that's why I wrote the book, Death of Civilization. It just came out last November. You can get a copy of it by going to chuckholton.com and becoming a supporter over there. You can get a free download, or you can just buy it off Amazon. And my book talks about the problem, the threats we face, and the second half of the book is what you personally can do about it. How you can take action right now to make your community more resilient in the face of a massive multi-cell terror attack or generalized unrest, whether that's from like Antifa or a hurricane or whatever. Okay, so it's not a doomsday prepper book. It's more about a real strategic and systemic approach to making your neighborhood more tight knit and more able to be resilient in the face of crisis. And so I highly recommend you go get that book. Again, the best way is go to chuckholton.com, become a supporter over there. You can get free downloads of that book and other books and other documentaries and things that I'm putting out. We're putting up a lot of extra content over at chuckholton.com. And so I highly recommend you go and support us that way, but you can also get them on Amazon. Would you be interested in an audio version of Death of Civilization? I was talking to my son Nathan about that yesterday, and we are considering producing an audiobook from this, which if you're interested, then we'll do it. Okay, let's answer a couple questions real quick. I've seen a lot of questions going by. Do you think it'll be safe for Trump to go to meet with Iran? Well, Trump is not going to meet with Iran. He's sending Steve Witkoff. and they're going to meet in Qatar. And yes, that's going to be safe. Um, Qatar is trying to act as a neutral mediator. They're not neutral in any way, shape, or form. They are certainly in the tank for Iran and Hamas, but they are pretending at least that they're neutral. Steve Witkoff, these level talks, there's Secret Service that go along, there's lots of security. We don't have to worry about the Qataris or the Iranians doing something shady in there because there just would be so much blowback. It just would be very bad for them. So yes, it's safe. George Smith asks, will we know whether, or will we be able to find out who is behind the attacks? I'm not sure which attacks you're talking about, because we've talked about attacks by the United States, by Iran from the Houthis, attacks in Syria. So you're going to have to clarify there. Not sure what you mean by that. You mean in the United States, if there are massive multi-cell terror attacks? We probably right away there's going to be a lot of conflicting information. Eventually they might the word might come out that this was an attack that was orchestrated by Iranian agents. The problem is these Iranian agents might not be Iranian citizens who came illegally into our country or something. They might be American citizens. The Iranians have been pushing very hard online to recruit lone wolves across the United States. We saw a terror attack on January 1st in New Orleans by a guy who pledged allegiance to the Islamic State. He was an American guy, former Army guy, a veteran, but yet he had pledged allegiance to the United. He had been radicalized online and then sent out to do terror attacks in the United States. All we need is for them to radicalize and have people like that waiting in the wings, and that could be there's a whole lot of people in the United States who are ripe for being recruited by Iran. So Iran doesn't have to send a bunch of its own IRGC or something into the United States, although those guys doubtless exist. Thank you, CA. I appreciate that. I'm originally from Mumbai, Denver says. The 26/11 attacks in Mumbai were horrific. I'm glad that India maintains a very good relationship with the United States. Yeah, I did a documentary one time on the Direct Action Resource Center in Arkansas. It's in Little Rock, Arkansas. And Darcy, as it's called, DARC, was started by a former U.S. Green Beret, legendary guy from Afghanistan, and named Rich Mason. We've had him on the show before here. And they put together, based on the massive multi-cell terror attack that took place in Mumbai, they put together a comprehensive training curriculum where they bring in police from all over the country and force them to work together and expose them to a simulated massive multi-cell terror attack with live role players, live bad guys using simunitions, rubber bullets. And I went through the course a couple of times, and I tell you what, it is brutal. It's 5 days long. You get shot more times in that course, and they teach you, like, you're not dead when you get shot. You're not dead unless you can't die unless we give you permission to die. And so you got to just keep going. And so you're running around in there and you're just getting lit up from all directions. And these rubber bullets feel like a real bullet. I mean, you get shot. Sometimes they even break the skin if you get hit in a place that's unprotected. And you've got a chest protector and a groin protector and a face protector and a throat protector, but your arms and legs and your backside are not protected. And believe me, that's what everybody aims at. And so when you get done going through that course, you look like somebody put a bunch of cigarettes out on your body. My wife actually went through the course once with my oldest son. And I mean, so that's how hardcore Miss Connie is she went through this course and did great, but it's brutal. And one of the things the cops learn as when they come out of this course is that all across the United States, we have all these different levels of law enforcement. There's federal, state, and local law enforcement, and they all have different tactics, techniques, and procedures. They all have different standard operating procedures, SOPs, and they have different frequencies on their radios and different ways of talking on the radio, and none of those things mesh. And so when you have a massive multi-cell terror attack, you what you find is that everybody responds, right? Federal, state, and local, FBI, ATF, DEA, local sheriffs, everybody, from the dog catcher all the way on up, everybody responds to the thing, and then they can't talk to each other because they haven't trained together. They have no continuity in their communications, and it's a huge problem. And that's what Darcy is trying to address. Now, there are a very limited slots at Darcy. If you're the kind of guy that's like, that sounds like my kind of training, I want to go to that training, you can actually go to the Darcy website and sign up for their training. It's not cheap, but it is the best firearms training I have ever been through on the planet, including my time in the military, including live fire training that I've done in the military. It is the most realistic training you can ever get with a firearm. And I highly recommend it if you have the money and the inclination to go get shot for a week. It is really, really good stuff. Those guys ought to sponsor my podcast because I just gave him a great plug there. I'm going to tell Rich Mason he should send me a free ticket. Okay, so what would make Iran agree on a nuclear deal with the United States? What's the incentive for them? Well, the incentive for them is your nuclear program is going away one way or another. You can do it the easy way or you can do it the hard way. This is what Steve Witkoff needs to say in these negotiations. The easy way is you guys dismantle your nuclear program and we don't bother you. The hard way is we come in with our fleets of B-2s and B-52 bombers and we drop lots and lots of ordnance on your underground facilities and make it extremely expensive for you and likely collapse the regime in Iran. Because if the United States is able to thread this needle, if we have to go kinetic against Iran, if we have to hit Iran and hit them with actual military force, we need to be very precise about it and make sure that we don't kill civilians, because the majority of the civilians in Persia do not like the current government there. And if we, what the Iranians are hoping will happen, the Iranian government is hoping will happen, is that we'll go in and indiscriminately bomb Iran, and that will turn all of the Iranians against America and make them coalesce around that government and will give the government a boost in the ratings. That is traditionally what happens when you get into a war. Whoever's in power gets a immediate bump in their ratings. For example, in the war in Ukraine, when the war began, Vladimir Zelensky had a 91% approval rating at the beginning of the war. Now his approval rating is about 55%, which is still higher than President Trump's, but it's gone down quite a bit. So the Iranian government is hoping the United States would turn the Iranian people again toward their leadership and make them support the government more. But if the United States is very careful and only bombs military targets and doesn't kill a bunch of civilians, what they could do is actually give the people who are against the Iranian regime the window that they need of opportunity to basically send the Ayatollah Khomeini the same way that Bashar al-Assad went, make him go off into exile somewhere and then install a more civilized government in Iran. That's what the people of Iran want. They want a more civilized, less extremist government. So that's what needs to happen. Okay. All right, folks. So 2,700 people online, and let's get some likes over there. Hit that like button for me. What would make Iran agree on a nuclear deal? Okay, so that's the incentive, Brandon, is the United States saying your nuclear program is going away one way or the other. Take your pick. One way, you decide to dismantle it, and the other way, we decide to dismantle it, and likely your government collapses as a result. That would be the ace in the hole for Steve Witkoff. All right. All right. So let me see here. Intelligence analysts suggest Iranian-backed Iraqi militias are conducting coordinated information operations aimed at dissuading the United States from striking militia targets in Iraq. Okay, so what I talked about this before, that yesterday the Iranian-backed militias have come out and said, we would be willing to lay down our arms if you will not attack us, if you end up attacking Iran, because we have said to the Iraqis, if things go sideways with Iran and anybody in Iraq starts shooting at American forces in Iraq, because we still have thousands of troops there, or in Syria, the United States will hold the government of Iraq personally accountable for that, and we're going to start striking targets in Iraq again. And so these Iranian-backed militias put out information saying they would disarm to keep that from happening. But intelligence analysis is suggesting that this is an Iranian information campaign that is specifically targeting Western audiences with these claims of disarmament, that they're really not serious about disarming, that they are just putting that out, trying to basically play the United States. And frankly, what they are seeing, what they're watching is, they're watching how the Trump administration is getting played like a really cheap fiddle by Vladimir Putin in these negotiations over Ukraine, and really is getting embarrassed by the Russians. And they're trying to do the same thing with Iran. So I think it's important that Steve Witkoff take a hard line there and not give in to these. And so what I'm saying here is that these claims that they're going to disarm are probably false, because they are notably absent from Persian and Arabic language media. Suggests that they're strategically crafted for Western consumption only, rather than reflecting actual changes in policies. Okay. All right, so we are 42 minutes in. Here's a question. What do you think of the Egyptian buildup near the Israeli border? Okay, let's talk about that. So the Egyptians have been amassing forces in the Sinai, which is part of Egypt, along the border with Gaza. The Israelis say that this is a violation of the peace treaty between Egypt and Israel. That they haven't been able, they're not allowed to do that. And more concerning is that they've been building airstrips and things that are more permanent. You know, you can move troops back out of there pretty easily, but this is more permanent. So the Israelis have a problem with that. The Egyptians have come out and released a statement saying nothing that we're doing in Egypt is going against the spirit or the letter of the treaty in any way. We have the right to move forces into that area under an amendment to the peace treaty that was from like 2001. And that is in response specifically to the threat of pushing Palestinians out of Gaza into Egypt. So I don't think we need to worry about Egypt invading Israel or invading Gaza or going to war against the Israelis. I don't think that's the issue here. The issue is the Egyptians are making a show of force to deter the Israelis or the Americans from pushing the Palestinians out of Gaza into Egypt. They just don't want that to happen. And so this is their way of doing that. Now, are there any indicators that would possibly identify a person that is possibly be a part of a sleeper cell? Very difficult, very, very difficult. When you look back at, like, for example, that guy that became a terrorist on January 1st in New Orleans, there was really not much in his background that would have given it away. If you, I would say, and this is painting with a very broad brush, but I would say that if you notice somebody on social media, one of your friends or anything like that, posting things that are very positive toward Hamas, free Palestine, that kind of garbage. If you see them expressing views that seem to be very sympathetic with the Palestinians or with Hamas, especially, or Hezbollah, or with Iran, I would be very suspicious of people like that. That certainly doesn't rise to the level of calling the police on them or anything. And that's the real problem here, is that a sleeper cell is just that. They're sleeping, so they're just living normal lives. They're plumbers and bakers and physicians. You remember Hassan Nasrallah? No, wait. What was his name? Um, oh, I just spaced. The doctor at Fort Hood who committed a mass violence event there in Fort Hood. I think he was an optometrist or something, or a dentist. This was years ago. But I mean, the guy was an active duty member of the US military, and he had been recruited and radicalized by, let's just say, extremist elements of the Muslim faith, and it caused him to go off and kill a bunch of people. What was there in his background other than the fact that he was a Muslim? And it's not illegal to be a Muslim. So it's very difficult to tell. And in my book, I talk about, that that's the wrong question to ask. The right question to ask is, how can I better get to know the people that I live near, the people who live around me in my neighborhood, and find out more and more about them? I mean, the part of the problem is, in today's day and age, we don't make friends anymore. We have acquaintances at work. We might know some people from church, and that's, if you're going to church regularly, that's the only place you'll probably be making friends. But we don't typically make lots of friends in our neighborhoods anymore. A lot of people don't even know the names of people that live in their neighborhoods. And that's a big problem. If we started mapping out the terrain around us, the human terrain, and getting to know the people who live around us and find out, hey, that guy over there is a raging, leftist lunatic. Okay, maybe he's somebody I need to look out for. If we find out that, oh, this guy over here thinks just like I do, and he's got a lot of skills that might come in handy in a crisis, well, maybe I want to get to know him better. Maybe I want to have him over for dinner and get to know their family and start barbecuing and stuff. The military calls that esprit de corps, and they specifically craft the environment that the soldiers live in to increase esprit de corps, to increase that sense of community. We need to start doing things like that in our communities to try to increase our resiliency in the face of a crisis. That's what my book, Death of Civilization, is about. Question: is there such a thing as a deep earth sonar that can be used to find the nuclear facilities in Iran and other countries? It would appear that such a tool would lessen civilian casualties. No, not really. There is not any really deep penetrating, like ground penetrating radar that can be employed from the air, but we pretty much know where all of Iran's nuclear facilities are. They have more than 50 of them, and they're spread out. Just about every major city has an underground nuclear site near it. And the United States has pretty much mapped out every inch of Iran. We know what's there. So we don't really need what you're talking about there, June. That's a good question, though. Zap Comics says, how are military targets found or located in different countries? Well, it starts out with what is satellite intelligence, so aerial intelligence. So we're taking pictures from the sky of a country, and we're poring over those, looking for clues to things that might be a threat. And we have AI programs now that can do that and help really make it easier for them to find when things, if there's all of a sudden a bunch of digging going on, or a bunch of dirt that's showing up and being dumped somewhere. And where is that dirt coming from? Because there needs to be a big hole where that dirt used to be. So then we follow the dump trucks back to where they're getting the dirt, and we figure out where digging is going on, etc. things like that. Uh, we can use human intelligence. We can use signals intelligence. So there's a lot of different kinds of intelligence that we can gather to create a holistic picture of what's going on in a non-permissive environment or a denied area that we have interest in, like North Korea or Burma or China or places like that. And amazingly enough, there is such good satellite photography available even to civilians like me. Now, if you're willing to pay for it, you can buy satellite imagery of any place on Earth, very high resolution. And so there are groups of open source intel analysts. These are guys that are just hobbyists. They're really geeking out on this stuff. And they're the ones who are actually coming up with threats and targets and gaining intelligence that the United States military ends up using in many cases. Stuff about what's going on in Russia or in Iran, stuff like that. Go places like Bellingcat, which is a website you can go to. They're just a bunch of investigative journalists. They do a tremendous job with open source gathering in open source intelligence and bringing out of that actionable intel that they then pass along to our government or any related parties. Okay. Uh, can you comment on Trump's remarks on Erdogan and why he seemed to make light of Turkey's movements in Syria? Yeah, President Trump has a unhealthy affinity for President Erdogan in Turkey. Erdogan is a thug. He's a bully. He is a dictator. He has jailed more journalists than any other country on earth right now. He has cracked down brutally and violently against his critics. He's made people disappear. He has funded the Islamic State to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. That's proven. He has assisted and funded the HTS organization that has now taken over much of Syria, and so on and so forth. President Trump, ever since his first term, has had this man crush on Erdogan that is inexplicable. And it's caused him to make very bad decisions in terms of his foreign policy in that region, in Syria and Turkey. So I think President Trump likes Erdogan for the same reason he likes President Putin, is they're kindred spirits. He likes strong personalities. Who doesn't, right? I mean, I like strong personalities. I just don't like evil personalities. And I think President Trump sometimes tries to divorce the evil from the strength, but I don't think that's a good plan. And it hasn't been effective for President Trump so far. The real problem that he's had with negotiating with President Putin is he started the negotiations by capitulating and giving concessions to Putin without asking anything in return. That's not good art of the deal, if you ask me. And because of that, he's just getting strummed like a fiddle by President Putin. And Putin is claiming that there's a ceasefire in the Black Sea, for example, while they are literally moving ships into the Black Sea and bombing Ukraine from those ships. So there is no ceasefire down there. They're just spitting in President Trump's face. And President Trump reportedly was very angry about that. What he'll do about it remains to be seen, but he shouldn't make the same mistake with Turkey. That's the best I can do with answering that question. Do you think other countries will take people in Gaza that want to move? There have been some European countries that have agreed to take some people from Gaza. Canada has agreed to take some people from Gaza. Um, that is about it. And it's nowhere near the amount of people who need to leave Gaza in order for Gaza to be rebuilt. There's 2.5 million people in Gaza, and no place has agreed to take that many so far. So there was some rumor that Egypt had agreed to take 500,000, but I'm not sure that was true. I haven't seen any confirmation of that. So I don't think so. Am I still going to Syria? Taylor asks. Yes, I still have plans to go to Syria in a couple of weeks. And so be praying for me about that. It's a very small group of us that are going to be sort of sneaking into Syria from Iraq. So I'll fly to Iraq and we'll do that. So I won't give dates and all that, but it's we're going to do it legally. Everything we're doing is legal, so as far as I know, but it is pretty sketchy. So it is kind of up in the air whether or not that trip will actually go off. We'll have to wait and see. What do you think is the end game of Russia? How long are they going to bleed? Russia has a very high tolerance for pain and a very low regard for their own people. So they will sacrifice millions of people if they have to. You know, a large part of the reason why they really want to win in Ukraine is because they need the population boost. They need the Ukrainians to become Russian because the Russians are in terminal demographic decline, and that will lead to the collapse of the Russian Federation eventually. It will lead to the collapse of Vladimir Putin and his government eventually, because they're just literally running out of people. They're not having enough babies, and so they're trying to steal a new population by taking over Ukraine. We know that for a fact because they have stolen something like 60,000 children out of Ukraine and have forcibly relocated those children against their will, kidnapped them from their parents, and sent them to Russia and put them up with adoptive families inside Russia, given them Russian citizenship. And now, to add insult to injury, Russia is actually drafting some of those Ukrainian kids into the army and forcing them to go fight Ukrainians on the front lines. This is as cynical as it gets and as evil as you could possibly imagine. So, question from JF. How is the Trump administration handling the HTS government? They are talking about meeting with them. President Trump has talked about, I don't know if Trump himself or Steve Witkoff will meet with the leader of the interim government of Syria. His name is al-Shara, in Qatar coming up in this month. So we'll see if that meeting goes off. I think that's a big mistake, but we'll see. A lot of European countries have been meeting with al-Shara and even reopening their embassies in Syria as if this is a new day for Syria. It's not a new day for Syria. It's a new night for Syria. Iacona 23 says, are you worried about Wickoff negotiating with Iranians given how disastrous and clueless he has been in negotiating with Russia about Ukraine? Well, let's just hope that he's better educated about the issues in Iran. I think it's more cut and dry in negotiating with Iran. You get rid of your nuclear program one way or another. That's basically it. That's our plan. So that's what we're putting forward. You guys get rid of your nuclear program or we'll do it for you. That's it. So let's hope that he holds that line and he's more he is more successful than he's been in Ukraine. He has been an absolute disaster in Ukraine. He has ended up parroting Russian propaganda, untrue Russian propaganda. And so that just makes me lose a lot of respect for the guy, I have to say. But let's hope he does a better job here. Question, is a small country like Israel easy to defend concerning military? How do you answer that question? They have less territory to defend, so that helps, but it's really the bad neighborhood that they live in that's the problem. And they are a modern country, so they have better technology than their neighbors. That helps. And they have the support of the United States. That helps as well. Thank you, Rich. I appreciate that contribution. You're very kind. All the contributions we get through the Hot Zone folks are going to help these people that we run into all across the globe. We built a hospital last year in Burma. We've helped people in Ukraine. We've helped people in Israel. We've helped people in Colombia and here in Panama. We paid for a man to have his eyesight restored here in Panama last year with donations that you guys gave through the hot zone. And so whatever is given through these things, that's what we purpose those donations for. And I am very grateful for all of you who are joining with us in that. This gives you the opportunity to sort of reach through the internet and directly impact people's lives in places around the world where people are hurting. And so I would highly recommend that you help people where you are, but you're helping us help people where we are. And we're doing a lot of good for a lot of people because of your help. So thank you very much for that. I appreciate it very much. So folks, again, please hit that like button and subscribe to the podcast. Make sure that you're subscribed here on YouTube. Also, I would highly recommend you go over to chuckholton.com. That's our locals page. And you can sign up as a supporter over there to support the work that we do on an ongoing basis. And that helps keep us in the field. It helps insulate us from the vagaries of YouTube. If they decide to kick us out someday for some reason, that kind of will help there. And so really appreciate all of you who have become supporters over there. And there's a lot of extra content that we're putting up specifically for you guys. So go check it if you are subscribed, because we're putting a lot of stuff up there. Chuck, how do you keep your sanity with all this world chaos? I trust Jesus. That is how I keep my sanity. If I didn't believe that there was a sovereign, loving God who is controlling everything and bringing all things together for his purposes across the globe, I would have lost my sanity a long time ago. Many journalists that do my job have to go to wars and disasters, end up getting divorced, end up becoming alcoholics, end up, just burning out, having a tough time. I've been able to spend my life in the worst places on planet Earth, watching mayhem and destruction and lots of pain and suffering for 22 years now, and still going. And the only way I've kept myself sane is because I trust God. I trust that he has put me in this time and in this place for a reason, and that my job is to tell the world about the people who are hurting. And so I try not to get too involved with the politics of the places that I go. I try to focus on the people who are hurting and bring their stories to you. And then the world can do a lot more about it than I personally can do. And that's the only way I keep my sanity. KP1 asks, oh, okay, so that was the question. All right. Okay, folks, that's all I've got for today. It is about noon on here in Panama, 1 o'clock East Coast of America. Pete Hegseth is here in Panama today, and so I'm probably going to be on Newsmax later on this afternoon talking about that. So God bless you, and you guys